Finally, the Mark 23 Grand Powers are starting to appear in the US. Got the X-Calibur CO here for a tabletop review and field strip. Go over what you get in the box, fit, finish, features of the gun, the changes to the Mark 23s from the older Mark 12s that you may or may not have known about. That and a little bit more coming up next on GBGuns. So excited to see these finally popping up in the US. Tia and I took a trip over to visit Grand Power in May and got to shoot some of these and do some videos with it. Some of those we've published, some are still on their way out. Very excited about these. The optics readiness is something that a lot of people used as their reason for why they didn't own a Grand Power. Well, now that's changed, as have a few other things. There's been a change to the operating system and change to the texture on the grips. More on that in a bit. In the box, you get 3 total magazines. These are 15-round magazines, and the Grand Power 9mm 15-round magazines are the same across all of the guns. So if you have a K100 or a P1, don't worry. You can use those mags in your X-Cal, and your X-Cal mags work in that. We get 3 additional back straps. I've gone over these at length in several other reviews. They are 3-sided, and as a result, they change the whole shape of the grip, not just the back portion of it. The texture on them has been enhanced and enriched. See if I can give you a quick camera view. If not, we'll have to check the article where I've done some photography to try to capture those. So they look nearly identical. Hopefully you can see the shine is a little bit different through here. That's because that's smooth and that's rough. It's got a somewhat of a sandpaper type feel to it. It really makes a difference. Previously in the US, the only ones that had that was the LP9M, at least the one that I bought, came with a few of these newer back straps. On top, we have cleaning brush, of course our federally mandated lock. In a baggie, we've got our 2 optics plates, as well as for the X-Calibur, the flush style safeties. That's because the X-Cals come with these large thumb rest style safeties that some folks don't like. I know for Tia, it's an issue of being able to get to the slide release with as broad as those are, but the intent there is that you can rest your thumb on it like you would a 1911, but it's even broader than you get on a 1911. Really makes for bearing down on the gun very easy. However, if you don't like those, you can swap to the regular ones that are included inside. Next, we'll take a look at the manual. Something nice that I've come to appreciate about the Grand Power manuals you'll come to see. Aside from your warranty being printed in 5 languages, that's largely because these guns, Grand Power is, by last count I heard, in 60 countries around the world. So just because something is not necessarily at every local gun shop here in the US does not mean it's not a successful or popular firearm elsewhere. Inside you get a basic breakdown including most of the major model designations. We also have our guide to Grand Power pistols over at GBGunsDepot.com. I'll put that in the pinned comment. I've reviewed all of these and can give you, except for the dynamic, and can give you a breakdown of them as well as the specs for all of the different models. I won't bore you in video with that, but the manual is very clear, decent English. As far as ammunition, it just says to make sure it meets SAMI or CIP specifications, CIP being the standard over there in Europe. But we've got full color and full color printing demonstrating now the images in here in this manual is for the older style of action in the Grand Powers. The new one is a bit different. However, I'll show you it's even easier for field stripping and getting back together. Getting the gun out of the bag it came in, you can see there's quite a bit of lubricant and preservative on the slide here. Bit oily, but man, is that beautiful. I'm going to wipe this off real quick. Just wanted to show it to you though, so that, well, let me put it the other way. Had I pre-cleaned this and wiped it down, then you would see my video, you buy one, you get it home, and you're shocked at what you find. Just wanted you guys to see the reality here. There we are. And as you can tell, the barrels have gone back to stainless. They were originally stainless. Then they did a coating for a short time. However, those coatings tend to wear, and so now we're back at stainless. I'm going to go over this pistol first and then do the differences and things, because I know chances are pretty good that you've not heard of Gram Power before, you're not familiar with the X-Calibur. It is the flagship gun of their line, and to get all facts out there, I purchased this firearm. I am a hardcore Gram Power fan. I own 25 different models, and we've got over 80 videos on Gram Power. I've visited the factory twice. So pardon my enthusiasm, but keep in mind that personal interest that I have in these is after having reviewed about 400 pistols. These guys are some of my absolute favorites for all time. That should tell you something. On with our regular review, you can see very easily that we are clear. Do we get magazine release or ejection? We get ejection. See that kick? Pops it out. And magazine release from the other side? Yes, it pops it out. Magazines are witness windowed on the left side only at your low, mid, and full points, empty being the bright orange follower. I've used Gram Power's magazines in several training courses, everything from blowing dust in desert to freezing snow and sleet, and not had any issues as long as you can keep them clean, which is easy to do. Disassembly is not difficult. As I mentioned with the magazine release, all controls on the Gram Power are completely ambidextrous, and our slide stop and release works on the left side. I love about these things. Ambidextrous controls is not just about appeasing left-handed shooters, it's also for serious shooters who want to be able to quickly and rapidly transition, swap hands due to shooting situation. In defensive shooting, it could be that you're injured. This makes it easy to operate from both sides. So coming up the front of the gun, we've got a bit of a bowl cut there, and you can see extended dust cover functional from the long slide. Underneath we have a single point of rail space. Do wish it could be longer, but since that's where they put their serial numbers, that's all you get. Texturing on the front of the trigger guard, and a little bit of a hook here for those that do the European style gripping out front. Smooth underneath, nice high radiused undercut. I can say as someone who's used these grips in several training courses, you don't end up with Glock knuckle. And if you're curious, yes, the frame, the lower part is identical on all of Gram Power's mid-sized guns. So this is the same frame that would be on a K100 and so on and so on. They just changed like the safeties or this extended magazine release. You can see how far that sticks out. Since we're here, we'll talk about the trigger. This is one of my favorite bits of Gram Power. Notice that the hammer is different. That's one of the changes from the Mark 12s. This is actually a special hammer. They'll throw back to some history in Gram Power. But for trigger, we have light take up to a wall. It's very light. Crisp break. It's got over travel enough so you don't throw your shot. Reset. It was right back at the wall for another crisp break. Now these are single action, double action guns. They actually make DASA with decocker models. They aren't currently imported to the US. The X-Calibur is not, since it is more of a competition gun, but it is a very heavy but very smooth non-stacking double action. It's something that you can come through and predict, like I did right there. That may be that I've got thousands of rounds through these guns, but I think it's a pretty nice trigger. Back onto the gun, you can see we've got horizontal serrations there, which is how it needs to be for a gun that wants to rock under recoil. Our magazine release button is somewhat shielded here, however this is an extended one because it's a competition model. And safety kind of squishes on, clicks off. Let me get the hammer back to make sure all mechanisms are doing what they're supposed to. Okay, there we go. Now we've got to click on, click off. And you can see we've got smoothness for getting the hand on both sides, smooth to guide the hand onto the gun, but all of our texture down where you want to actually hold on. And this fissure texture here is one of the enhancements. It looks minute, but it feels incredibly different than the older stuff. Sorry I don't have a better way to prove it to you, because visually it really doesn't look like a whole lot. They look identical, but they feel very different. Underneath, we do not have any beveling for a mag well, because double stack single feed mags are your mag well. Around the back side. And we've done hand fitment demonstrations with all 4 of the back straps in other videos to show you how it changes the grip. Our slide to frame fitment up front is very tight. In fact, this is the tightest I've seen in recent memory. And in the back, we have a little bit of side to side. That's about it. Blacked out serrated rear sight and a very fine red fiber optic front sight. I love this sight combination. I wish it was available as an aftermarket thing. These are target sights. They're adjustable for both windage and elevation, and removing that allows you to mount your plate for an optic. Next, we'll field strip the X-Calibur CO and take a look inside the gun. Field stripping the ground powers is actually pretty easy. It's just different. Folks who struggle with them, I try to remind what it was like to field strip a basic Browning action your first time. It takes some getting used to. Hook your middle finger in the trigger guard like this. This is not necessary, but it's what works best for me. And we're going to pull down on the takedown tabs, both sides. Make sure your hammer's back first. In fact, give it another check to make sure it's clear. And I'm going to pull the slide all the way to the rear and lift up a little bit, and it'll ease forward. Like that. Inside, see, we now have a metal guide rod, uncaptured recoil spring that is color coded. That's in case tuning is needed. That would be for the competition guys. Keep in mind this is a competition oriented pistol, and for folks who travel the world, might be facing different ammo at different places. Now, something that Gram Power has been doing for 20 years, but didn't get too popular until it was modular, is you see we've got a stainless steel chassis in here. This is cut from billet. We've seen them cut. We also see those 3 letters there. That's the guy that built this chassis. Pretty neat. You might notice the polished feed ramp and how low it sits relative to the magazine. Right around is going to be pretty much above that. That's because since this is not a Browning action, the barrel's not tilting, the barrel has to be lower, but it can be lower because it's not tilting. Pulling our barrel out, you can see things are quite different in there, and all unnecessary weight removed. Yes, it is an internal extractor. I've yet to have a problem from that on my Gram Power guns. I know there's a lot of internet lore about internal extractors versus external. I have yet to experience a problem on a Gram Power. So the barrel rotates to lock and unlock, and that's what this cam groove is for. And a little Easter egg, if you will. Any of my rifle guys might be able to call that out and recognize this as very similar to an AK's action. The reason why I love this in the Gram Powers is you don't have the mass of the barrel shifting back and down and then up and forward to cycle, and so it makes for a smoother recoil impulse. A lot of people don't believe me on that. Our friend David, the Humble Marksman, is getting to know Gram Power for the first time over on his channel. He will be an interesting third party to hear the response from, because to me it makes a big difference. But a beautiful stainless barrel here. You can see the whole side of it is rounded. We'll check for chamber support while we have this out. Using some Liberty ammunition for our chamber support. These are nickel plated cases. Helps them slide in a little bit. It's also corrosion resistance. Chamber support, well, listen for a clunk just like that. Chamber fitment, make sure the round fits freely. And you're looking to see how much brass is exposed beyond the shoulder. And you will see that none is. That is a fully supported chamber that ensures uniform expansion and contraction, at least the expansion of the brass, maximum power to push the bullet. And should there be something wrong, it's not blown through the steel. It's going out the end of the barrel. Nice thing to have. As I reassemble this, I'll talk about what you'll see in the shooting impressions video. Our range videos include starting with our absolute first shots through the gun. First time firing it, you get our impressions live there on camera. No warm-ups, no practice or anything like that. We'll do a full magazine plus 1 to see how the mags run with the gun fully stuffed. Our trademark What's for Dinner test, see what the gun eats. That's 10 additional loads, in addition to the 11th load that we're using for range ammo. Wide variety, steel case, aluminum case, different hollow points, nickel plated, you name it. We try to toss it in there to help folks find the right ammo for their gun. We've got a practical accuracy test as well as a sights and trigger control test over on a 6-inch spinner shot from about 13 yards. Then we'll give you our concluding thoughts. So for reassembly, you'll want to make sure your barrel's in its right spot. You can identify that by the serial number being visible through the ejection port. Go ahead and unlock it, let it slide forward. You get your recoil spring in its home, and then we're going to pull the slide all the way back, set it back down, and ease it forward, just like that. Easy to do. Quick functions check to make sure everything is still good. Check some more. Safety still works. And there you can see the rotating barrel action that I was talking about. As it unlocks, it rotates and remains parallel to the ground. So what's the difference between this guy and the old Mark 12s, aside from being optics ready? We'll talk about that next. Differences between the X-Caliburs. I've got my old like 2016 X-Cal down below, the new CO up top, Mark 23, and you can see first off, aside from surface rust on this barrel, yes, I abused this gun, did not take care of it, and I regret it sorely. End of story. The barrel was longer on the Mark 12s than on the Mark 23. It's a little more flush to the end of the muzzle here. We have a more holstering friendly muzzle with this bowl cut. It was just kind of a rounding edge a bit on the Mark 12. The slide cuts are significantly bigger on the Mark 23s to shed weight. Remember, your reciprocating mass up here results in felt recoil. We'll weigh the two slides and see what the difference is there, but my guess is part of that was to save some weight capacity for running an optic. As soon as you throw an optic on there, you're throwing off the balance and weight of the slide with the potential to cause malfunctions. That's part of why we don't review guns with dots, because depending on the dot you choose, the gun you have, and the ammo you choose, you could accidentally cause malfunctions. Nothing wrong with running them, just check your stuff first. The texture difference I mentioned earlier, now this is one of the bigger back straps. Hopefully you can see now how much smoother this is than here. The hammer difference, a throwback to, I believe, when STI, now named Staccato, was importing the Grand Powers, they had that hammer, so Grand Powers using that. Top of the slides are a bit different as well. And you might have noticed that this original barrel is a bull barrel that is fluted and sort of tapered, whereas on the Mark 23s we have a little bit of a taper there, but it's otherwise a flat straight barrel. I was a little bummed at that, just because I like the flutes. Do you need them on a handgun? No, but are they beautiful? Yes. So why'd they go away? Well, part of it is the action type. There was a change. The Mark 12 used this bearing surface here and a roller bearing inside the chassis for the rotation to happen on, whereas now we've got that lug and that guide inside the frame to make things happen on. Why change it? My theory is Grand Power has expanded massively in the years since the Mark 12s were first designed. Machining this requires a lot of machine time, a lot of attention to detail. Mostly it's machine time, and that means cost. This costs more to make, takes more time to make, which makes the gun cost even more and puts sort of a cap at their production capabilities. Whereas this design is a bit simpler. Just putting that groove in there. I can also tell you that it feels like there's a difference in barrel weight considerably. Whether or not that matters to you, well, it does impact the total weight of the gun. Let's see what kind of weight difference we're talking about with the barrel, and then more importantly with the slide. Had to dim some lights to get this to be a little more readable for you, but let's start off with the original Mark 12 X-Calibur barrel. It was 4.9 ounces. Mark 23, now 3.6 ounces. So we have indeed shed some weight there. Now the juicy part, what's the slide difference weigh? You see they did have some deeper cutting back here because they could. They didn't have to worry about an optics plate. 10.9 ounces. Mark 23, maybe not as deep up top here, but certainly bigger cuts in the front. 12.4 ounces, interesting. So we actually have a little bit more weight. If I remember that correctly. Yeah. So the new slide weighs more. Another change that I noticed is while the Mark 12 had a polymer guide rod, the Mark 23 uses steel. And we have a slightly different chassis in there. So let's see, though this is the big backstrap, hopefully that doesn't make too much of a difference. We had 10.5 ounces previously, and now 12.3 ounces. So your Mark 23 is overall going to be a heavier gun. That's something most competitors like. I'll put all this back together and we'll get a assembled weight. Fully assembled without a magazine, the Mark 12. 26.4 ounces, 0.3. The Mark 23, 27.4. So really it's only added an ounce overall. Interesting, minute change. These are generational changes. I'd like to hear what you guys think about it. As far as recoil and what the difference is between these, that's something that we'll have to discover on the range. Yes, we shot the Mark 23, but we shot the Match CO, which has steel up here instead of polymer. It's all part of the chassis. Don't worry, we have a video on that as well. But it was jet lagged, very tired after a whirlwind trip getting to Slovakia. So, plus using their ammo, shooting at an indoor range versus our normal outdoor. Different ammunition, different environment. It was hard to say whether or not they felt the same or different. To me, it felt a little bit less smooth, but we're also shooting a pre-production model. This is full production. When we get to the range, we'll be able to put these two side by side. I think for most of you, it's going to be the new Mark 23 CO to have that optics ready, since most folks want optics these days. I'm curious to hear from any of you that have experienced a Mark 12 X-Calibur, if you are excited about these changes or not. If you've never experienced one, then it's not going to make much of a difference. However, at the time that I'm filming this, I don't know how much longer the Mark 12s are going to be available. So, if you want one of any of the models, I suggest grabbing it sooner than later. Our guide in the pinned comment should get you over to a place that has them. They're currently on sale when I'm filming this, but who knows what the future holds. That is a tabletop review and field strip of the Mark 23 X-Calibur CO. We'll see you on the range. Thanks for watching.